Hello and welcome to another episode of Empathy at the Table. Today we're having a conversation with Jan van der Putten from Holland, now residing in Barcelona. You know, every so often you meet people and you're just intrigued by their story, intrigued by what they do and how they do it. Well, Jan is one of those people. He's in corporate finance. For 30 years, he's been involved in mergers and acquisitions, bringing companies together and creating value. He's lived in Hong Kong, Shanghai, London, and now he brings his expertise to us here from Empathy at the Table here in Barcelona. Look forward to this conversation. Thank you for joining us. Hello and welcome to another episode of Empathy at the Table. Today I'm joined by Jan van der Putten, who I've actually met quite recently, but he's had a real impression on me, both as a personality, his knowledge, the kind of things he has in his head, and also what he does for a living. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome you, Jan, to Empathy at the Table and ask you to introduce yourself to our guests.
Great. Well, thank you, Tony, and wonderful to be here. I'm Jan van der Putten. As everybody will have figured out by my name, I'm Dutch, living in Spain, though, since the last 5 years. And I've got two things that occupy me daily work-wise. The first one, I work at Wave Partners. We're a small M&A advisory boutique. And secondly, I recently trained as an executive coach, and obviously is the brand name. And what I try and do is coach, once we've completed an M&A project, coach people through the integration process.
Excellent. And I also want to say to the listeners, this is your very first time doing an interview on a podcast.
It is. So if I look a little bit nervous or speak too fast, then that's the reason.
Yeah, so far so good. You're a pro. So, Jan, you mentioned you were in M&A. Of course, most people listening to the podcast will know exactly what that is. But I'd like you to describe, from a negotiation point of view, what does mergers and acquisitions, what does it actually entail? And who are the stakeholders that you typically interact with?
Yeah. So mergers and acquisitions, in a way, is quite simple, right? It's one company buying another company, and of course, on the other side, it's one company selling themselves. There are a few variations of it, for example, joint ventures or strategic alliances. But in the simplest form, it's the buying and selling of companies.
Okay. And you also in your profile you said you also deal with companies that wishing to divest as well. Could you explain what that is as a concept?
Yes, absolutely. So many organizations are larger in size, and some of them, including my old employer, have multiple businesses. And what they do at the headquarters, they do strategic reviews every couple of years or so, to determine what should be in the portfolio and what not. What really fits with the company's strategic objectives and which parts of the organizations do not. And those that do not fit with the strategy are then divested to other companies for whom that type of business fits in their organization.
Great. The way you're explaining this in such a logical way. 1 + 1 = 2. It sounds really simple, right? So, where's the catch? Why is it so difficult, so challenging?
I really like that question because I was doing a little bit of preparation, of course, and I was going to bore everybody with a standard M&A process, the very logical steps, right? You got to be really well prepared. You got to know what you want. And then you got to negotiate against the objectives. You got to have a set process. You got to have tension in your process. You need to have a plan B, and then execute well. But that's the 1 + 1 = 2. What really an M&A project is all about, particularly as an M&A leader, is your part shepherd, part psychologist, and you're also a part of an informal leader. And that really is the skill, the art of getting a deal over the line that really works for both partners.
Yeah. For those people listening on Spotify or on iPodcast, Jan's got a big smile on his face at the moment when when he talks about this part, getting your hands really dirty, right? Getting in, opening up a company, figuring out what are the differing interests of the parties involved. And then, as you said, you're working on being, part psychologist, part coach. And then you have to put on your kind of analytical hat to see what actually makes sense. When you do these type of deals, what is it that attracts you and puts you in a position where you say, yeah, this is something I really want to get myself involved with?
What do I love about my job? Because I do really enjoy my job. And what I love about it is a little bit the variety. So every project is different. Every group is different. But what I really love about it, and I think that's a little bit in the art of doing a good deal, is you need to have the ability to make sure, and there's a Dutch expression, all the noses are pointing the same way. So, selling a company or buying a company, you're not buying or selling a car. It's by far more complicated. You've got a lot of stakeholders often, and the stakeholders being the board, the shareholders, management, employees. And all of these people need to be pointing the noses the same way. So they're at the start of the project really is all about what are everybody's objectives, and making sure that we all rally behind the same objectives so that we all know what we want and we all know what's a good outcome of the project. And that's really that's the part of being a shepherd.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As an advisor, you advise and you get the whole group, all the little sheeps walking into the same directions. And that's not just at the start of the project, because M&A project, it's very, very emotional for people, because people's jobs are on the line, often a lot of money involved, there's prestige, there's ego involved. So the stakes are high, and a good advisor is able to guide the whole process and to guide the whole team towards the objectives that everybody has agreed to at the start of the process.
Wow.
And that's a little bit the art and the skill of being a good advisor, that you're able to do that in a tactful way, where everybody feels that they've been heard, that they've been listened to, and that they've been taken serious.
Well, I didn't think we were gonna get to talk about emotions so quickly, right? When you and I met, I think a couple of weeks ago, you did tell me that you in previous jobs, you were very analytical and you'd worked in companies where you never talked about emotions. But you've already talked about egos, you've talked about prestige, you've talked about anxiety, you've talked about how people feel. So how long did it take you to when you look at a merger and acquisition, how long did it take you to realize that actually at the seat of all of this stuff, when we strip away all of the numbers, really what we're dealing with is how people feel about this deal and people feel about each other?
Yeah, that took me quite some time. And I think the first part of my career, I was really an advisor, and I worked for a couple of investment banks. And it wasn't really until I did in-house M&A for a big Dutch multinational, where you're a few more levels involved, where you know the characters by far more intimately. So the characters being the board, the executive teams, and these people are often your friends as well. And it's really not until then that I really figured out, wow, this is actually a real emotional journey for the people involved. And that's where I really had the realization that you need to really pay a lot of attention to how people are feeling, making sure people feel respected and that people feel that they're heard. And that also comes, as you and I discussed, with a bit of self-realization, right?
Yeah.
That's the nice thing of getting older and maturing. You get to know yourself a bit better.
Yeah.
So yes, but it took me a good 10 years, I would think.
One thing I've observed about you is that you're a very, very good listener. You ask really good questions and you stick around for the answers. A lot of people, they master the asking questions right. And then when it comes to listening to the answers, you can see they're already spinning the wheel and thinking of the next question.
Yeah.
Is this learned behavior, or are you just naturally a good listener and good at asking questions?
I think I'm probably naturally a decent listener, but I really learned the importance of it over the years. And I think one of the ways where I learned it is by working on a lot of cross-border international deals. So you're working with people of different cultures, of different backgrounds, of different countries. And so listening and understanding each other becomes even more important. And, one of your podcasts, I listened to them with Kwame, and he talks about a good deal is a win-win, right? Where both parties feel, hey, this is a good deal, I can live with it, we're both winners. And he is 100% right. And to create such a deal, people need to trust you. People, as an M&A leader, as the chief negotiator, both sides need to trust you and believe you're true to your word. You're going to follow through on your promises, and you're not lying, right? You're a reasonably truthful guy. You can err on the optimistic side, and to do that, to build that bond, to build that trust, you need to listen to people. It's that simple, yet that hard.
Yeah. So tell me some of the things that you hear, right? When you go in and you hear that somebody wants to sell a company or somebody wants to buy a company, but obviously that's what they want. But what they need, there's something behind that, right? So what are the kind of things that you actually hear people telling you versus what you intuit is what they really need?
Yeah. You hear people say, you hear people say, for example, I want the best price from, let's say you're on the sell side, you want the best price for my company. And I want to leave it in good hands. Those are, two fairly reasonable objectives, right? But of course, what's underneath it are many hidden layers, right? For example, for the management team, who do I report to? Who will be my boss? Will I like this person? Do I even want to work for the acquirer? Right, because often you're in a sale process, there may be 3, 4, 5 parties interested, and the party paying the highest price or offering the highest price may not be the preferred party for the management team. And how do you deal with these tensions, and how do you even figure out as an advisor what the hidden objectives are?
Wow. And you remain like neutral in the middle, or do you, when you're getting involved in these deals, do you find yourself kind of emotionally attached to one side versus the other?
Yeah, I mean, I love to tell you, no, I'm completely objective, but the reality is you aren't, right? And I was once on the sell side of a project for the company I was working for. And we had 2 offers on the table. One company that we all really liked, but they were the lower bidder. And the other company that had been very, very difficult in the process. The negotiations were, very, very, very difficult, very abrasive. And so we were all rooting for the other company. And of course, what do? You call it the preferred bidder, and you tell them, look, we love you, but you need to up the price. And this is what happens in deals. If you're a likable buyer that is able to build a bond of trust, right? That people say, look, I like to deal with the people, they're a good home for the company, but they're a lower bidder, you often get a second chance. To prove your offer.
I mean, that's such a fantastic point. I mean, if anybody ever needed to know why it's important to focus on, building the trust, the soft side of the negotiation. I think that's the answer, because on paper the deal could look fantastic. And I like your term, the preferred bidder, right? The preferred bidder is simply the one that I like the most, right? And it doesn't mean it's the best deal on the table, but you'll make it the best deal, right? Because of, that's fantastic. And I mean, when does it go wrong? Tell me some stories of perhaps maybe when you've been involved in an M&A that you intuited would go one way and then it's just went catastrophic.
I know
it was a catastrophe.
Yeah, well, a project is so complicated. There are many reasons why a deal can break, but one of the main ways a deal can break is when the trust is gone.
Yeah,
and that's happened to me a few times in projects that I've observed, is where if one. Every project needs one or two champions on both sides, right? That really push the deal, where that's holding the deal together, holding the parties together, that truly believe this is a win-win for both parties. But when that trust is gone, and like I said, that's happened to me in one project where I was on the sell side and the buyer walked away on the day where we were supposed to close, and that was simply because I'd been asked to renegotiate the terms of the deal. And the other side simply didn't think that, accepted it during the negotiation. But then a week later just felt that was so deeply unfair, and that the trust was broken, and they walked on the day of closing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just in time. Yeah.
Yeah, just in time. I remember.
And it's very
ahead.
painful, right? Because to me, I think what makes me a good advisor is that people trust me.
Yeah.
And that's my client as well as the other side. And I'm generally able to create a good bond of trust. By being true to my word, but also using humor. I like to use humor as an icebreaker, as a way to connect to people. And so when I was asked to renegotiate in that example, to do that also didn't feel great. Although I understood the rationale, didn't feel great, and it killed the deal in the end.
So humor, have you got that typical kind of caustic, sarcastic Dutch humor? Is that what you 100%. Tend to rely on?
Yeah, 100%.
I love it.
I've learned though. I like it too, and it works well with many cultures, particularly with the English, of course. But you got to watch out. In certain countries, in Asia, it's not always appreciated. So you got to pick your humor wherever you go.
Yeah,
it's a great icebreaker, I find.
Definitely. I remember you talking about different cultures. Can you share what we spoke about when it comes to working in some of the Asian cultures where they make decisions by consensus, and and what effect that has on the negotiation process?
Yeah. So many countries, many customs. For example, in China, if you're buying a company, it's often owned by one person, and there's only one decision maker. So whatever you do, it's one decision maker. But in certain cultures, for example, Japan, consensus is by far more important. And I worked on a number of transactions in Japan, and it's really, you really gotta better understand the Japanese to do a good deal. And there were a few things I learned on my deals in Japan. One is to really figure out what's going on and what are the objectives of your opponent. You do not learn that in the meeting room. You learn that at dinner, when you're all having a little bit of sake, you're having a beer, you're having some small chat, and all of a sudden you really figure out what it is they're after. And secondly, Japan is very much a consensus culture. So, and that's where I needed to help my counterpart. My counterpart had to go all 10 members of the board and get their individual approval. And these 10 members often didn't look at it from a holistic point of view of the whole deal. Does the whole deal make sense? But they looked at it from their particular point of view, being it finance or HR or whatever. And that's difficult for your opponent.
Yeah.
That's why they always were quite slow in the discussions because they needed that consensus building. On the flip side, once they had the consensus, it was 100% deal ready to go, and no uncertainty. Whereas in China, where you often have one negotiating against one person, signing of the contract is the start of the negotiation.
Wow. That's a really, really good insight.
Yeah.
You said something as well that I remember hearing this. So you want to, when you're negotiating in Japan, you want to help them to help their counterparts or their stakeholders. So the person you're negotiating with, I think in Harvard they call it that help them write their victory speech, right? So you're helping them so that when they go, what does it look like when you're presenting this deal to your counterparts? So you actually find that works in the Japanese culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think it works in any culture.
Sure,
right?
sure.
Especially for Japanese larger multinationals, very powerful. But of course, at least that was my experience in that negotiation. The Japanese aren't natural sharers of what it is that they want and what they're after. And so you really need to you really need that relationship of trust and listening to really understand what helps them get the deal over the line. And that's where in Japan, I still remember we had one negotiation and we were doing it on a national holiday in Japan. So already our counterparts, it was a national holiday, it was even spring flower, I mean a very important holiday, and we were there. Probably weren't in the best of mood, and we had a disaster of a meeting. It just didn't go anywhere. Nobody moved. And they said, look, we'll take you out for dinner, because the Japanese are really polite like that. And they may not have even wanted to.
Yeah.
And half of my team said, we don't want to go. We want to, let's just do it with our own little team. And I said, no, we have to go. And we did. And it's the best decision we made that day. After the dinner, the deal was sort of done.
Wow.
Just the power of the informal relationships, people opening up, people being a bit more relaxed, people feeling they can speak, off the record a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I've never told you this, but you should know this. And it was so powerful.
Fantastic.
And we did the deal thereafter. Yeah.
I love it. Love these stories.
Yeah.
And I mean, the rooted in these stories are some really, really good lessons, real insights. The fact that in Japan, as you said, it's the consensus and you have to kind of work before you actually get the deal. But in China, the signing of the contract is the beginning of the negotiation. I mean, these are small subtleties. Well, they're not really subtle, are they? But these are key areas within cultures, embedded in cultures, that it's important to know. I want to come to you a little bit, Jan. Look, you came to Barcelona. The plan was, let me take 3 years off and just relax and chill. 9 months later, you're back in business. You're working.
Yeah.
Kind of, what was the driver? What happened to the other 2.5 years?
Yeah. I had a very busy job most of my life, and until I came to Spain, lived and worked for 8 years in China, which was a truly amazing experience, unique. We all loved it. The family loved living there. But after 8 years, we had to go back. And I decided that I wanted to take 3 years off. But what I did discover is that after 6 months or so, I really missed working. I really missed I really missed what I did, working with teams, having an objective, realizing this win-win for both parties. I really, really missed it. And so I was lucky enough to meet my current business partner on the bike. We're both keen cyclists. We met on the bike, and we've done, I think, about 8 deals together so far.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I've got another question, and this is something that's been kind of spinning around in my head since we last spoke. When you, in the beginning, right, when you start off working, especially in the world of corporate finance, you need to be, this is a statement. I'm not saying whether I believe this to be the case or not. So help me think it through. But you need to be an alpha personality to get the deal done, right? You need to be able to bully people. You need to show strength, and then it would seem that once you've done that, then you can then start paying attention to the softer side.
Yeah.
Does that seem like a fair cycle, or do you think it can be reversed, or do you think it's just completely off mark?
No, I think it's a fair comment, and in a way, I think there are leadership models like this, right? When you start your career, you focus on the hard skills to do whatever skills that your job requires, and then once you shift into a leadership position, you focus on the softer skills. But that's what happened to me in my career. I didn't focus on the softer skills until I was, sort of early 30s. And I think, in a way, for me, that was really a missed opportunity, because I always figured I didn't need to bring myself to work. I always figured I had to be, an ambitious person, good in the hard skills, and I always thought soft skills aren't that important. We all have a goal. People are self-motivated, and I just need to drive my team hard to get to the desired result. And it wasn't really until I was in my early 30s I discovered that it doesn't have to be that way. You can bring yourself to work. You can be authentic. Of course, you got to manage a little bit your own emotions, but you can be authentic. And there are much better ways to motivate your team than the whip. And it really took me some time to realize that. And I was happy I did. I think it made me a much better leader, a better negotiator, by far better, and a better person, right? A better dad and husband, hopefully. But I should have had these skills when I was younger, because I think, at least I wouldn't have had that feeling that there's two Jans, and now I feel there's one. But at the time I felt there's sometimes two. There's me at work and there's me at home.
Yeah.
And it should be like that.
No, I definitely can identify with that. And, I think you get to a certain age where you just don't want to pretend anymore, right? You just think it's just too much hassle to be one person at work and one person outside work. And then you somehow figure out a way to just be you. And that's okay.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Absolutely. And absolutely. But it does come with a certain amount of, you got to know yourself to be able to do that. And I guess when you're, I don't know, I guess you don't do that till maybe a little bit older. I don't know, at least I didn't. But yes, absolutely.
Jan, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our conversation, at least on the podcast. I mean, we'll continue, you and I, for years, months and years to come. But I'd like to just ask you to share with us, what is it you're working on right now that's driving your passion? And how can listeners, if they've heard something that they're really intrigued by, how can they find you?
Yeah. So we advise people through corporate transformations. So being at companies that want to sell themselves, or companies that want to make an acquisition. Kevin and I are highly experienced M&A deal makers. And I hope you get a sense in the podcast, we're much more than knowing the M&A process. We're experienced negotiators. We've seen it all before. And so we coach organizations through these complicated processes. And next to that, I'm also a trained executive coach, and I coach people through these processes as well as through integrations thereafter. And if you want to find me, that's either LinkedIn, it's a great resource, or www.wavepartners.co.uk. And for the coaching side, it's www.unobviously.coach.
Fantastic. And just to finish off, you're learning Spanish, and you're doing that on a public forum. I saw a video of you the other day speaking in Spanish. How's that working out for you?
Yeah, I'm improving. It's like anything else, right? You gotta have the time and you gotta have the motivation to do it. And at the moment, the motivation's high, so I'm working through it. and hopefully becoming fluent in, who knows, by the end of the year.
Jan van der Putten, thank you very much for joining us on Empathy at the Table. It's been a real pleasure and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.